Today, we wanted to talk about ADHD. So, the formal definition of ADHD I have here. People with ADHD show a persistent pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. And then it's got a list of a whole bunch of things that has to happen, like often fails to give close attention to details, often has trouble holding attention, often blurts out an answer before a question has been completed. I can never wait for people to finish their sentences, and I did not realize that was an ADHD thing. Or I try to finish the sentence for them. Like, I guess what they're trying to say, and I try to confirm it before by saying it before they do.
Yeah. It's like I listen to podcasts and audiobooks on like 1.2 times or 1.5 times. And I feel like it's my brain almost trying to be like, talk faster because I'm so bored. And I know that sounds so rude, and it is kind of, but it's also like,
we just require that stimulation.
Yeah, it's the understimulation, which is something that I know we've both been working on, is being more comfortable with the space, with the silence, and meditating helps with that. I think we'll get into a lot of everything in this episode, but I almost want people in real life, I want to be able to 1.2 times or 1.5 times their actual speech, because I can already, like, my brain's already formulating like what's happening, and I'm like, okay, I know where you're going. Can we just get there so we can move on to the next thing? Okay. Yeah.
By the way, this book that I'm reading right now is called ADHD 2.0 by Hallowell and John Ratty. Sorry if I said that wrong. But it's got a really important sentence I want to mention before we get into some of the symptoms. ADHD is a term that describes a way of being in the world. It is neither entirely a disorder nor entirely an asset. It is an array of traits specific to a unique kind of mind. I think that's very lovely.
On one hand, you have people telling you you're so smart, you're so capable, you can do anything you put your mind to, you have so much potential. I don't like that at all. I find it triggering when people say you have so much potential. It's like, okay, so you're saying that I'm not good enough now, and I could be great if I just stopped being so much like I am now. It's like, I know that I'm great now. I know that there could be great in the future too, but I'm just tired of hearing that. You have so much potential. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm good enough as is. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very paradoxical to be somebody who's been told that they are smart or creative or have potential, but then also be struggling with things that seem so simple. It seems so simple. Like, why can't I pick up my clothes? Why can't I put them away after I do the laundry instead of leaving them in a pile? I don't know. It's a great question.
There's a pretty long list of paradoxical traits. Probably won't go through all of them, but one of them, I don't know where to start. Okay, let's just start with the first one. Mm-hmm. Passionate, zealous, idealistic, will sacrifice everything for a cause or a friend. So that's the useful trait. And paradoxically, it can become problematic. So the person can become rigid in the service of a cause, can become fanatical, strident, irrational. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think it's also important to note that ADHD can also be like comorbid with a lot of other different traits, different conditions. So I think some of these can also relate to other conditions that may not like specifically be ADHD as well.
So another one, the useful trait is they can be meticulous, and then the problematic trait is that they can be very disorganized and even chaotically so.
I think it also comes down to the dopamine of being like super immersed in a task, especially if it's something that you're passionate about or that you're interested in. Then you can be really meticulous, super detail oriented. And it says in here, especially on things that matter a lot. So yeah, if I'm working on something that matters a lot and that I know is due tomorrow and that is really important, then I can like hone in and really dive into each of the individual important components. But then the other side of that is that if it's not that important, if it's not urgent or if it's not interesting, then I have no interest in organizing it or getting into it at all. if it's a project that's due 3 months from now, you know, it doesn't seem that important to start organizing all the little details, and it can be really easy to be disorganized.
That's different because ADHD people struggle with understanding time. So, like 3 months from now just seems like an eternity away. Like, why do I need to worry about it?
Yeah.
It's 3 months from now. I have all the time in the world, and we have difficulty conceptualizing time.
Yep.
Another trait related to that can get a lot done in a short amount of time, which is useful. But then the problematic trait is that we fundamentally have a different sense of time. There is only now and not now. So basically, yes.
Yeah.
The list goes on. Should I continue? Naturally creative is a useful trait, but sometimes so creative that we have trouble organizing all the ideas and doing something productive with them.
Yeah, that's super relatable.
That's like us in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
we have so many ideas, and honestly, I think a lot of them are really good ones. I'm somewhat surprised that we actually wrangled ourselves together to get this podcast going.
You know why? It's because we're very complimentary.
Yeah.
You're like super creative. You like doing the social media posts, and I actually like editing the videos.
Yeah.
So I think it just worked out really well for
And
us.
it also works out that we already like having conversations about all these different things, and we're interested in this. So it's really exciting, and I think the accountability of having us both on this project really helps. Like if it was something I was doing by myself, it would be, I think, a lot harder to keep it going consistently.
Here's another one. Initial surge of excitement over new plans, ideas, and projects, but then that can become problematic in that the excitement peters out in the middle phase and we have trouble sustaining interest, which will be interesting to see what happens with this podcast.
I think the part of it that I think we can keep the excitement going because every new topic is a new exciting thing to dive into, and every new person to interview is a new exciting person. So I don't anticipate losing interest because I feel like this is just I get to just talk about stuff I'm interested in. It's a dream. I would love for this to eventually be
Oh, me too.
like a job.
Some of these are like, okay, this is a good list. Confident, self-assured, but also very insecure. Imagine that. How does that happen?
Yeah.
Extremely hardworking, but also driven and too compulsive and can't let up sometimes. Yep.
Yeah. Relatable.
Useful trait is a lightning quick mind, problematic when it can't shut down.
And that's interesting too because I was reading an article by Dr. Gabor Mate, which we'll talk about him as well because I know you've read his books. But he was talking about the addictions and how like addictions form obviously to solve a problem in that person's life, and when you have ADHD and it's really trouble to quiet your mind down. Like I a few years ago like started using cannabis more, and it's definitely not problematic in my life and never has been, but I recognized when I started using it, I was like, wow, I've actually never experienced my mind being quiet before, ever. And when I first smoked weed, I was like, this is so peaceful.
Yeah. I remember one time I took Vyvanse and I was just like, wow, I can work. What is this? I'm like, this is so easy. I can work.
Yeah, it's wild. So I can totally understand why obviously addictions do develop because people will take something that has given them some benefit or relief, and then sometimes it just gets taken, further than is healthy or helpful for that person's body and mind and lifestyle. I mean, there's so much we could get into with this episode. I think there's so much societally that is toxic and broken and just convinces people that they need to be on all the time. Like, it's just like we live in this rat race where it's like if we're not constantly pushing forward, then we have the risk of falling behind. And then that leads people to develop a lot of disorders. And a lot of it is relating to the way our society is structured and the stress around that. So I also kind of feel like that's important to say because I think sometimes people will look at disorders or certain behaviors as being problematic and being the person's fault. But there's so many factors that go into why somebody's struggling, and a lot of it is just inherent. It's like the water that we live in, you know?
There's a couple of other ones here that are really good. I just want to read over. The useful trait, very generous, big-hearted, willing to give with no exception, and that can be problematic when they start to give away everything. Another useful trait, funny, the life of a party, can connect with everyone, and that can become problematic because they're also secretly lonely and feels like nobody understands them. A strong leader, charismatic, that's the useful trait, and that becomes problematic because they actually hate the position of leader, and they worry that they're letting everyone down, and they're unaware of their own charisma.
Yeah, I can relate to
Check.
that. Yeah, and I think there was also a list, the ones that you might imagine when you think about ADHD, but it's like tuning out or kind of being zoned out or just not being present, difficulty concentrating unless you're interested in something, bored easily, beginning something without finishing what you started previously, having trouble keeping things in order, like organizing your room or your car or your desk, trouble being on time, poor impulse control, speaking out of turn or interrupting, impulse buying, and a tendency towards impulsive or addictive behaviors. When I read this list on his website, I truly don't know how it took me until the age of 29. And I think it's just really because as a society, we have less of an understanding of mental health than I think we need to, but also because in women, it often is invisible to parents, teachers, or they're not paying enough attention, or the symptoms manifest in different ways. When you hear ADHD, often you think about like a 6-year-old boy who's super excitable and hyperactive and won't sit still. But for me, I think a lot of my hyperactivity, it manifested inside my head. Like I was hyperactive, constantly thinking, really anxious. I definitely had OCD as a kid and have worked on strategies to like mitigate that in adulthood, but I definitely recognize that as a kid I had tons of compulsions. Like I'd repeat in my head. It was like my brain would never shut off, constantly hyperactive. And I think we do our kids and our youth such a disservice by not understanding these things about these symptoms that like not getting to know someone well enough to ask what's going on inside their mind, to inquire about these, and tons of people just slip through the cracks.
So approximately 5 to 10% of the population has ADHD, and if it seems like more and more people have ADHD the more that we talk about it, I think that's merely because it's becoming safe to talk about. Right? It was like the same thing as when people started coming out. Like it became safer to be like your true self.
Yeah.
So then people started talking about their true selves. It wasn't like it wasn't there before. Now it's just we're in an environment where it's safer and we can talk about it and we can deal with it and manage it.
100%, yeah.
ADHD can be genetic. It said if one parent has ADHD, then the child has a 1 in 3 chance of having ADHD. And if both parents have ADHD, then the child has a 2 in 3 chance of getting ADHD. But also, ADHD can arise from the environment. So if the mom is smoking or doing drugs, the baby can also develop ADHD. And I think that ties in with what Dr. Gabor Mate says. He says that ADHD stems as hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity makes you more sensitive to trauma, which leads to ADHD.
I was just briefly like kind of looking through some of the things that he had recently written, and I was reading what he said about sensitivity, and I thought it was really interesting because he said something like sensitive people and like usually sensitive children are like the canary in the coal mine. And if you don't know that analogy, but essentially like if I don't even know what is that analogy, like that there's, what is the canary in the coal mine? It's like there's something's going on in the coal mine and the canary dies, and it's a way to alert the people that work in the coal mine to get out. But anyways, the sensitive child or the sensitive person is like the canary in the coal mine, because they often start showing symptoms relating to being in an emotionally unsafe or unhealthy or toxic environment more than or earlier than or differently than other children or other people in the family who may not be as sensitive or as attuned. So I thought that was really interesting because I think, like you said, and like Dr. Gabor Mate says, that sensitivity is a trait that you're probably born with. You're just a more sensitive person. You're more emotionally, physically sensitive to the stimuli around you. But then that sensitivity can lead to you being more susceptible to develop symptoms and develop disorders because the world was not set up to support human beings emotionally, largely. So we're in this world that does not show kindness or compassion for our sensitivity, and then that leads to pain and suffering and in some cases trauma and traumatic experiences. And then those traumatic experiences then feed into more symptom development, more disorder, because it's the body and the brain's way of trying to make sense of a situation and trying to adapt and cope. I can recognize for me, like, not being attuned to in the way that I needed, and not being in an environment that was consistently emotionally safe and healthy led to being dissociated for a lot of my life. Like when I look back, like I don't actually have that many memories that I can pick out. Dissociation is, it's your brain trying to protect you. It's your brain going, okay, this environment's pretty stressful. Maybe there's a lot of yelling. There's some unhealthy behavior. There's some passive aggression. This doesn't feel good. Like a kid can't always say like that what particularly is wrong, but their brain's like, let me try and protect you. Let me try and keep you safe. How about we just shut her down? How about we just like dissociate? And so then I think that leads to a lot of ADHD related symptoms as well. So it could have been something that I was born with. It could have been something that developed. Who knows?
Yes, I think it is important to say that ADHD can be developed as an adult. If you didn't have the symptoms as a child, you could have developed it along the way. Personally, I don't remember any signs as a child. I didn't really struggle until I got to university, when I started almost failing and I had to study and I just had no idea how to. And then one thing that I wanted to note, based off of what you said, so the common responses to stress when you're in a stressful situation is fight or flight. And as a child, you have neither option, because if you're fighting your parents and you're a hypersensitive person, you might be like, if I fight them right now, they're not going to love me anymore, and then they're going to abandon me. So that's not an option. And as a 7-year-old child, you do not have the option to take flight. You're stuck in the home, or else if you run away, you go outside and you die in the woods. I don't know. So as a child, they deal with the pain is to dissociate. And as an adult, once you start dissociating, it becomes problematic because you don't have those same parameters around you anymore. Now you have the option of fight or flight, but you just don't realize it yet. You haven't done the work to realize that, like, this is a new situation. And now as an adult, we have to relearn how to navigate the world.
When I first heard like the terms fight, flight, or freeze, I realized that I have been in freeze response for most of my life.
There's also a fourth, fawn.
Fawn.
But go ahead, yeah.
Oh yeah, what's fawn again?
The example that comes to mind is when you are about to be sexually harassed and you fawn because you don't want to present any danger to this person, so you pretend like you like what's going on.
Like people pleasing.
That's fawning.
Yeah.
I believe.
Like someone is being inappropriate, but you don't want to incite violence or have any negative consequences, or it's somebody who you don't feel safe turning down, so then you just people please and you
just go
kind
with
of
it
go.
because you believe you have no other option.
Totally.
You had a story though.
Did I? Memory. Oh yeah, I was going to say, like, I'd spent most of my life in the freeze response, and I think that it's really interesting to think about how that may have developed, because I think the freeze response, like, if you were to look at my behavior, you might say, like, this person has difficulty focusing, or this person might have ADHD, or has trouble focusing, or procrastinates, or is disorganized. But ultimately, I think my behavior was an attempt, unsuccessfully, for my brain to manage my emotions when I had never been taught how to do so. I'd never been taught, like, okay, when we're feeling overwhelmed, here's some tools in our toolbox. We're going to learn deep breathing together. We're going to learn how to manage our anxiety. Like, I had never seen these healthy coping skills in action. I had seen a lot of yelling and screaming and other ways of coping that were less healthy. I was not taught how to manage my emotions. So when I had come up to a problem, like a project that was due, I would get really panicky. The perfectionist in me would be like, you need to do well on this or else your life is over. And that immense pressure would cause me to avoid the project completely until I absolutely had to, until the very last minute. Because thinking about that project was basically bringing me to think about the fact that I would end up not successful, die alone, abandoned by my family, and unloved by everybody in the world because I didn't succeed on this project, which means that I wasn't going to be a doctor, which meant that I wasn't going to succeed in life. Hence the spiraling and the catastrophizing, and I didn't have the emotional tools to regulate that. So I would just go, project, too much, big emotions, avoid, put it off, push it away until it was the night before, and I'd go, well, fuck, I have to do this now. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting thinking about all of the, like, things that sort of led to those behaviors, because I think in some kids they're just it's sprung up from birth, and they may have the most healthy environment, and they still may have these coping strategies or skills that are less adaptive. But I think that there's so many other explanations for why this is happening that we need to be asking questions about.
And in a similar vein, like I said, I didn't really struggle with the symptoms when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I think that I was just a very obedient child. That's all that it was. I feel like ADHD, it does manifest as all of these symptoms, but I had all of them internally, like the shame, the self-doubt, like lack of self-confidence. I had zero self-confidence for like 30 years. And ADHD was never on my radar until one of my friends got diagnosed. Then they just started talking about it, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really familiar. And then they were like, why don't you just go talk to a doctor and get diagnosed? And actually, I'm still not diagnosed technically, but I feel like I have done so much work this year that I'm kind of managing my symptoms on my own. And the only reason for me to get a true diagnosis would be to get the medication. And I do have a psychiatrist. He has given me medication, and I have tried it. And personally, I don't find it effective for me. The benefits are not outweighing the side effects for me, because there were like dry mouth, like lack of sleep. But the medication is actually proven to be very effective for most people, and it's proven to be very safe. Like, lots of people take it for a very long time and they do fine. For me, I think it's a part of my journey to kind of navigate life without it, because I've been without it for so long. And I feel like I'm kind of starting to figure it out.
And I think we should, again, I know you've already kind of said that, but like, if whatever your journey is with taking or not taking medication, like there's many paths that you can take, and neither is right or wrong. It's just whatever works for you and your body, and that's like such an individual thing to try something and see whether or not you actually like it. And like you said, the benefits didn't outweigh the side effects for you specifically, right? But like for other people and for other people's bodies, it may work out well. And so I don't want to like dissuade anyone from trying something that may work for them, but just to be mindful that everyone's body is different and everyone deals with side effects in different ways. And all we can do is just try something that may work for us individually and see how it goes.
I also had to really fight for myself and stand up for myself in order just to even get the medication. So my family doctor had been my doctor for about 6 years. And then when I approached him with ADHD, he was kind of hesitant to start with. So he gave me a Concerta, and then I told him it was making me depressed. And I think you have to maybe keep a journal when you're trying all of this so that you are aware of what's happening. Because if I didn't realize that the Concerta was making me depressed, if I continued it, then who knows what would have happened. I would have been more depressed. But I took it for about 4 or 5 days, and I was like, this is absolutely horrible. So I stopped. And then I went back to him and I was like, hey, can I try Vyvanse? And he's like, no, you can't. And I'm like, excuse me? And he went on a whole rant about the street value of Vyvanse and how addictive it is and the risks of addiction. And he was like, do you think that the risk of getting addicted to Vyvanse is worth it? And I was like, yes, I need help. So he said, well, fine, what if I send you to a specialist and he can give you Vyvanse? And I'm like, that's exactly what I want. Thank you very much. And then he sent me to a psychiatrist. So that's my diagnosis story.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have to, and I think it's like that with anyone who is navigating like a mental health diagnosis or even like a chronic illness. I know so many people who have like autoimmune diseases or chronic illnesses who have had to do so much of their own research and advocate so hard for themselves just to even be heard. And I think that the medical profession is structured in a certain way. I think it's been that way for a really long time. I think that there's a lot of resistance to changing or to adapting to new circumstances. There's tons of new research coming out. There's tons of professionals talking about things that maybe are not being taught in the traditional sense, or maybe in school, there's only a certain amount of curriculum allocated to this specific topic. So it's very possible for a lot of people with different conditions or disorders that they actually may know more than their medical professional based on the level of education that professional has received.
Mm-hmm. And you need to be your own advocate.
Yeah, you really do.
And
yeah.
I actually cried when I read this book because I was seen when I read this book. They like completely laid out my feelings, and like this book saw me when my doctor didn't. So it was very, very validating. And I think also as a woman, doctors just think we have a better pain tolerance or something, and they don't listen when you're a woman. You need to stand up for yourself. But would you like to go into your diagnosis story?
Oh, yeah, sure. And by the way, the book, for those of you listening, was ADHD 2.0. That Tina found life-changing and very validating. So for the last couple of years, I have been kind of coming to terms with the fact that I have ADHD. And I think when I first started realizing it, somewhere around 2020, I don't know. I think at first I was ashamed because I had a lot of internal shame already about like myself and who I was. And I think that I felt, I don't know why, looking back, I don't know why that's something I would be ashamed about. But I think it was like another layer of like something that I needed to fix about myself, or something that I had done wrong, something that was my fault, or something that I just felt like I wasn't enough. And here is another reason why. But over the last few years, as I've done more research, learned more about ADHD, learned more about myself, it's been really helpful to kind of pinpoint the origins, like pinpoint how it manifested as a child that was never recognized, or that I didn't receive the help for that I needed. And then also recognize the way that it manifested when I was in university and when I was doing my master's and really struggling. I've sort of gone through like a really personal journey of acceptance around it. And then I kind of came to terms with it in a really positive and empowering way, and kind of understood that, like, okay, if this is the reality, if these are my symptoms and this is a disorder that I'm experiencing, then how can I make the most of it now? And so I had heard a lot of creators on Instagram and TikTok talk about a service called Done, D-O-N-E. So I looked into that, but it's only available in the States. And so then I kind of did a little more research to see if there was something like that available in Canada. And there is, and it's called Frida, so Frida. And the reason why this is helpful is because, like Tina said, a lot of medical professionals, if you're going to just your family doctor or a walk-in clinic, can often be dismissive. They may not hear you or listen to you or truly be interested in understanding you on a personal level. And then they may also have these misconceptions and the stigma around medication, where they're assuming that you are going to abuse it or sell it or misuse it in some way. And so they may not even entertain the idea at all. So there's so many hurdles that you already have to jump through with finding this out about yourself and getting to know yourself better. And then there's even more medical hurdles that you then have to jump through. So I just didn't want to go through that process at all. I didn't want to have to go to a doctor I don't have a family doctor. So I didn't have somebody who I knew well and who knew me and who I trusted. So I'm really grateful that I found Frida. So basically it's an app that matches you with a nurse practitioner. I'm not sure all the parameters, but they can prescribe medications, at least some of them. It was about an hour and a half phone call meeting where she just went over some symptoms that I had as a child, some symptoms I was experiencing now as an adult. And I even remember like one of the questions that she was asking me, and halfway through the question, I interrupted her to answer it. And then I said, sorry, got excited. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, there's a symptom for you. I didn't even mean to give it to you, but you didn't even have to ask me a question about it. Here it is. Here's your answer. But yeah, so I went through about an hour and a half conversation with her on the phone. It was really helpful. It was really validating. And at the end of it, she confirmed to me that I think I have like 9 out of 9 of the symptoms of inattention and 6 out of 9 of the symptoms of impulsivity. So I felt very seen and very validated, and I sobbed after that call because I finally had an answer for so many things that I had struggled with as a kid. So many times where I was screamed at for my room being messy when I had no concept of how to not be that way. I wasn't taught like step by step, like this is how we organize, and this is how we manage our emotions, and this is how we deal with things that are stressful to us and get through it in a healthy way. I was just yelled at for so much of my life for these symptoms that I didn't understand how to manage. And so I felt so seen and so validated to finally have an answer for why I had struggled for so much of my life. I could have, learned how to manage my symptoms without the diagnosis, but I really did appreciate having the diagnosis just for validation's sake, just for peace of mind, knowing that like there's nothing wrong with me, but there is a reason why I have these symptoms and why they're manifesting in my life this way, and there's help and there's ways to cope.
Yeah, because you don't exist in isolation, and everything that you've went through, other people have gone through. And luckily, there are scientists that have studied this, and now they know what to do next. Immediately, when I learned about ADHD, I started doing a ton of research. And I've got two other books next to me that were very impactful on me as well. One of them is Scattered Minds by Dr. Gabor Mate. And basically, his entire book was just validating, like this happens. You weren't taught how to deal with your emotions. You had a traumatic childhood, and like the characteristics that you have now are a result of that traumatic childhood. And it's not like it's a death sentence. These are the steps that you can do next in order to take control of your life again. And another book that helped me a lot is called A Radical Guide for Women with ADHD. And they are also written by, I think all of three of these books that I have are written by doctors with ADHD. And that is incredibly validating that they're doctors. And like, we're all creative, we do things, cool things. So this one is a workbook, but I read the actual book. And I found this book also extremely helpful because it's written in a woman's point of view, which is very different from a man's point of view most of the time. So this was probably one of the more validating books too, where it really hones in on our sensitivity and our feelings and like what to do with them. An important thing to note in all three of these books is that like the number one way to manage your ADHD is self-love and self-compassion, and to stop being so hard on yourself, and to give yourself the room to make mistakes and realize that you're a human living a human existence, doing human things, and mistakes happen sometimes, and they're all growing opportunities. In my ADHD 2.0 book, I was just flipping through it. One of the, like, sometimes children grow up in traumatic experiences and they don't develop ADHD. Why is that? It's because although they had the environment that could have produced ADHD, they also had very loving and caring people in their lives. So the one example here was the man had his grandma that realized that he had these issues, and his grandma did everything that she could to provide him with what they call vitamin C, vitamin connect. And she just connected with her grandson and loved him and made him feel like he was fine the way he was. And he grew up with minimal ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, that's a super important point to make. And I was going to say something like that too, because we got a question from Instagram, and I'm going to read that question for you, because we put out a poll on our Instagram asking if anyone had any questions or any topics that they wanted us to talk about on a future episode. One of the questions was tips for starting when it comes to executive dysfunction. And executive dysfunction kind of being, in a nutshell, like just feeling like it is impossible to, like the feeling that it feels like you can't do something, like whether it's like a combination of, ADHD, executive dysfunction symptoms, and it plays into depression too. But there's been times where I felt like I just couldn't get up and take a shower, even though I desperately wanted to take a shower. I wanted to be clean, but it was like the act of going through all those steps and getting into, like, being naked and then cold, and then getting into the shower, and then getting off and drying off. Executive dysfunction is really interesting because, of course, we are physiologically capable of doing these things, of getting up and going to take a shower, but it feels so impossible to do so. And so one of the questions was, do you have any tips for starting, just getting something started when you're experiencing executive dysfunction? And one thing for me in my life that I have realized has been so impactful is self-compassion and self-love. And in the past, I would try to punish myself or hate myself or beat myself up into, quote unquote, being better, or into doing the actions I needed to do. Like I would try to start a new routine, and maybe that would work for a while. Like I'd be like, oh, why are you so lazy? Like just get up and go for a run. Like if you want to be a runner, you have to run. Or I'd be like, oh, you're disgusting. Why can't you just get up and take a shower? Like I would be so mean to myself in my head, and that meanness and that pain and that hurt would only lead to more shame and more of the undesired behavior, because I would feel like, okay, well, if I'm so horrible and so disgusting, I'm just going to sit here and be disgusting for longer. And there were times like in my periods of depression where I would go like 5-6 days without taking a shower, even a body shower, not washing my hair, not washing my body. And I say that because I know that I'm not alone in that. And if you've ever experienced that, you can feel so much shame around it. And I think one of the most important things that I learned for myself was to provide more care and love in my environment too, and in my mind. So if getting up and taking a shower and having that sensory experience that changes so drastically in that process, if that's uncomfortable for you, what I started doing was I would light candles, turn off the lights in my bathroom. I'd have a fluffy robe ready for when I get out. So that way I'm minimizing the chances of discomfort and maximizing the chances for me performing this desired behavior. Like punishing yourself and hating yourself into doing something is just not a sustainable long-term solution, and it's not good for you. It's not healthy. And so, yeah, when I started loving myself more and just being, like in the shower example, just being compassionate, being like, I know you're so exhausted. I know you don't really want to get up and take a shower. I'm sorry that you're having such a hard time. Let's try to make this easier. And when you speak to yourself, like you would imagine speaking to a child who just was playing outside in the dirt and just does not want to go and take a bath, but you know that that's necessary for this child's health and well-being to be clean, you would be gentle and kind, I hope. You would say, I know, really sucks. You really liked playing outside. You really don't want to get up and go take a bath, but let's go do this together. We can use your favorite toys and the little rubber ducky, and we can have fun. It's going to be warm, and then we'll wear your fuzzy robe after. Like, I really started learning how to reparent myself, love myself more, and treat myself like I was a little child, like I was the child inside who was hurting and who was asking for my love. So I think that is an extremely underrated method of like life improvement, self-compassion, and self-love.
So Dr. Gabor Mate actually says that ADHD is more similar to underbrain development than actually like missing a part of your brain, because the traumatic experiences in our childhood prevented us from developing the way that we were supposed to. So I wonder if you could extrapolate all of that and say that like we do have childlike parts of our brain that maybe we do have to reparent ourselves. And that's just a matter of the fact right now. Like sometimes I do feel like a child in an adult world, and I'm just like, how is everybody else doing it? So I totally get that. And it's like, it's so important to be kind to yourself, because it's like you said, anything you do out of fear and hate is completely unsustainable. And I teach basically the same thing when I teach people how to eat and like learn to like food again. Like you can't hate yourself into following a diet, because you might stick to it for a week or two, but you're a human, and what happens when you make a mistake? Well, then now you're even worse of a human than you were before. So you have to like flip it all around. You have to completely love yourself and love food, and then approach your goals from the direction of love and like the viewpoint of love.
Yeah. It's really difficult to do, and it's a lifelong journey. And so it's okay if you're not there yet. And there's definitely days where I still can be really hard on myself. It's not something that is just a one and done, like, okay, love myself, check. It's something that you kind of have to commit to every day. And I think there's little ways that you can do that. If you think about like love languages, you think about like acts of service, quality time, physical touch, like all these things. Like, what are you doing? Can you incorporate a few kind, loving habits for yourself? Maybe it's like, I have a really nice facial oil and I like to like massage it on my face, or I have lotion, I like to rub my shoulders when they're sore. Or, quality time, like, are you spending quality time just with yourself, not with any agenda, not with any productivity in mind, but just genuinely wanting to do something for you, whether it's like reading a book or whether it's going for a walk, putting your phone on do not disturb, putting your phone on do not disturb, and just doing something for you.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe we could do a whole other episode on self-love, because I'm thinking back into my younger self. I feel like I wouldn't even have known what the idea of self-love was because it was so foreign. Like, how do you love yourself? I think maybe I thought that I was loving myself, and I thought that like dieting myself and hating myself into being skinnier was self-love. So I feel like that could be something that people struggle with too, because I definitely did. And it's taken up until this year for me to really truly understand how I need to start taking care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you talked previously about you said you lost your 20s basically to your eating disorder. And I think it's really important for anyone listening or watching to understand that, like we said, this is a lifelong process, and like we're not always going to love ourselves or treat ourselves in the way that we need to. But it's just about being kind, being gentle when you have done something unkind to yourself, and just moving forward with mindfulness to keep trying to show yourself the love that you need and that your body and mind have been craving, especially if you have not received that kind of unconditional love and acceptance in your family or in your community.
Mm-hmm. I have here, my next question is, what has changed in your life since getting diagnosed? The most important thing coming from the realization that I do have ADHD is the fact that, it's not my fault. There's nothing wrong with me. I can live with this and I can still do great things. I think stemming from all of that, it's the self-forgiveness that like, if I'm struggling today, like it's okay. Like I don't have to be 100% every day. And like, there's nothing wrong with me because I'm not 100% every day. I think I struggled with productivity and feeling like I had to be this, and this, or else I was a failure. And that goes back to like all of that shame stuff too. So I feel like it's all kind of just coming together, and we're just on like this growth spurt into the next level. And it's all starting with love.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's changed for me since my diagnosis, well, like I said, it was kind of the validation that I felt like I needed, because throughout my life, I had these symptoms that were looked down upon and talked about really negatively about me and towards me, whether it was teachers on my report card saying that Jordynne is very bright but struggles to stay in her seat, and can she please stop getting up and talking to her friends during class. And I didn't have a concept of understanding that these were symptoms and that these could be managed and helped. I was just kind of told like there's something wrong with me, and I had no understanding of how to change my behavior, or constantly for most of my life having a messy and disorganized room. And instead of being provided with the tools to really understand how my brain likes things to be organized and how to put things back in this right place, like how to find what's the right place for this, how to put it back there and keep putting it back there, like having these healthy strategies or having healthy emotional regulation strategies. Like I just wasn't taught those. So getting this diagnosis really was like validation for me that it's not some moral failing that I have always had throughout my life, that I've always just been like a bad and lazy person who's disrespectful, can't clean up after myself, like who's like all of these things that I had been told about myself, that I was just, disorganized, disruptive, lazy, all of these mean things that I heard said about myself, that they weren't true, and that I have a brain disorder that has very specific symptoms that, again, like you said, are not my fault, but are now my responsibility to learn to live with and manage. I've been in therapy for years now, and so that's been a part of managing those symptoms, is kind of working with my therapist on some past experiences and kind of getting to the root of why some of my behaviors are the way that they are. Has really helped with the shame part, has really helped with the emotional regulation, has helped with the self-compassion, and with creating emotional safety in my life. I think another big impact of getting the diagnosis has been, like, if you are just seeing yourself as this person with these horrible symptoms that you don't understand and that you think are your fault, you don't understand that there's actually a community of people like you. So when I got diagnosed with ADHD, I found a lot of accounts on Instagram and TikTok that I personally found really helpful, who share tips that they use themselves to help them manage their symptoms and help make their lives better and make their lives easier. And so I think it's really helpful for me, like, to have that community of people who are like me, who can share those experiences. And personally, I was prescribed Vyvanse as well. It's been a couple months since they prescribed it to me. It's still sitting at the pharmacy because I keep forgetting to pick it up. But I think also for myself, I am on the fence. I'm open to trying it, but I know for myself that some of the side effects do make me nervous. I am a little bit, I don't drink coffee, and I rarely drink caffeinated tea. I'm really sensitive to stimulants like that. They do tend to make me anxious, give me dry mouth, give me nausea. And so I am personally, not saying that the drugs aren't great or that they don't work for other people, but I am personally nervous about introducing extra stimulation into my already very sensitive nervous system, when I've worked so long and so hard on creating emotional safety and creating a sense of well-being and peace. I am quite nervous about increasing my cortisol. So that's part of it. And I think another part that I'm nervous about is the appetite suppression, which is definitely a very common symptom when I already personally struggle with eating enough, and I have had disordered eating behaviors throughout my life, that I do not want to continue, and that I already struggle with getting enough food in my body, that I don't need any more appetite suppression. So that's in a nutshell kind of what's changed with the diagnosis. And so who knows, maybe I will try the medication. It is a low dose. See how my body reacts to it. See if it works for me. I think the biggest changes have been finding a community of people like me and finding the validation and support that I never received.
So I think we've pretty much done a brief-ish overview about everything ADHD. If there's anything that you guys want us to dive into more deeply, definitely comment and let us know. But I think it's been like almost an hour, and I want to just, as a last thing, touch briefly on what's helped us with our ADHD. And I think like all of these could be their own podcast episodes too. So I don't think we should spend a crazy amount of time on them. But I think it's extremely important for us people with ADHD to do work that we find is going to have an impact on the world and that is stimulating. It's incredibly important to find work that you enjoy. That kind of presents difficulties in itself, but I think that spending the time to figure it out is going to be worth it in the end.
For sure. And I think, it may not be something that is possible for everyone. Like, many of us need a a regular gig and then also have like, you know, a side hustle that provides us with the stimulation and dopamine that we need. But I think if you have the capacity to explore like what is it that you truly want to be doing with your time and with your life, that is totally a worthwhile pursuit. And I think I kind of went through a similar experience, like going through my university, my master's, and then thinking about applying for medical school again. And after my master's, I realized that I don't think that I could do a job that was so desk heavy. I think if I ever went back into research, I would want to be doing a ton of field work, working directly with people a lot. It's not something I would totally ruled out for my future, but I know myself better now, and I know what kind of accommodations I would need to live a fulfilling life and to enjoy that profession. So maybe it's just about asking yourself, like, what would feel better? What would make this experience better for me? Or what kind of job would provide the kind of support or accommodations that I would need?
Or anything with like crazy bureaucracy, I would be like, no. No, you want me to do what? No.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know, something that would require so much, like having to be so on in a professional capacity, like being a politician and you're expected to always wear this crisp suit and always speak your most eloquently. And it's just, I need to be able to express myself authentically and be who I am. And I wouldn't want to be in a profession where I would be constantly judged so harshly on just being a casual and relaxed person.
Yeah, but there's so many positives to us too. Like, we are extremely creative, always thinking of new ideas. I will not identify with the word lazy anymore, but I can be extremely efficient if I want to be. And so like if I'm given a task that I need to do that's menial and day to day, I'm going to look for a way to like automate it or make it faster. And like that's a skill that you could do. So there's so many things that you could do to like use your ADHD and kind of capitalize on it, because it's extreme creativity and like a ton of so many ideas. Exercise has also been incredibly helpful for ADHD. It kind of helps like calm the mind. And I was telling you the other day, like the only way to get out of your mind is to get into your body. Exercising is like the best way to do that. And then another way to do that is with the cold plunges.
Yes. So, and for the exercise, like that's something that I haven't been so consistent with for a while now, and it's something I'm excited to get back into. And again, it doesn't have to be the most extreme version of it. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars a month at an expensive gym. It can be as simple as like turning on a 10-minute video and just doing squats and just doing body weight workouts along with a person on the screen, or creating incentives for yourself. Like maybe you have your laptop with the workout in front of you, but then on your TV behind that, maybe you have like your favorite show, or, you know, a show that you tend to watch over and over again. Like for me, it's like The Office or Parks and Rec. So finding ways to make it work for you. If you're having trouble getting some movement into your day, you can do it in a way that is enjoyable, that also provides you with whatever stimulation that you're looking for. It doesn't have to be horrible. It doesn't have to feel like a punishment. But I do think it is really important, and it's something that I think, I think makes a massive difference. And scientific studies have shown that exercise makes a huge difference on ADHD symptoms, depression symptoms. So, yeah.
It is the probably number one most important thing that you can do for your mental health. And if it was able to be prescribed as a pill, it would be the most prescribed thing in the world. But because it's effort and it takes work, a lot of people aren't willing to do it. But seriously, it is like the best thing that you could do for your health, like period, full stop, period with a T.
And I think, And I think it's like it's a matter of just finding what works for you, because everyone's life and everyone's bodies are going to be different, and there's going to be days where like maybe you work shift work and maybe you worked a really tough 12-hour overnight shift, and like, you know, maybe you're not going to go for like a 10-mile run after that shift, but maybe you can do something to move your body even in a small way. I think every little bit helps, and I think it's just a way of like figuring out, and I haven't mastered this by any means, like I'm still learning how to integrate movement and exercise into my life, but yeah, I'm now recognizing just how much I need it, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Every little bit does help, even if it's 5 minutes every day, even if you're just starting and you do 1 minute every day, even if you just like walk around your house in like 3 circles, it all adds up.
Mm-hmm. I think we should talk about the cold plunges.
Yeah. We've started cold plunging about 2 months ago now, and both of our lives have radically changed.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I mean, like, we're doing a lot of work outside of the cold plunges, but like the cold plunges just kind of went whoop and brought it all together, and like now we're blossoming. I'm blossoming.
I would say I'm blossoming a lot more than I was before too.
It like sped everything up like times like 100.
So one thing that I found really helpful that I just kind of realized the other day. So I have previously tried to meditate, like listening to a meditation, because for the most part, when I do meditate, it's with a guided meditation. It's not usually with just silence. And I would recommend that if you're starting out. I think a guided meditation is incredibly helpful and feels much less daunting. I would previously, like, you know, a year or two ago, be listening to a guided meditation, finding myself like it's really hard to be present, really hard to focus, really hard to sit still. One thing that for me, I recognize is that like my brain, like many ADHD brains, is constantly understimulated in a lot of ways. There's definitely times where I felt overstimulated, but a lot of the time I'm understimulated. So if I'm like doing work, I want to be like crunching on something, or I want to, if I'm like, I want a show in the background. So meditation was always really hard for me. And then when I started cold plunging, I realized that it was providing an extreme amount of external stimulation that I needed in order for me to kind of like breathe, calm down, and be present. Because when you're in there, it's such a shock. It's such an extreme experience in an ice bath or in a cold shower. It kind of forced me to learn how to be present, to learn how to just slow down, breathe, have my exhales be really long, longer than my inhales, to learn how to slow down my breathing in real time. And I found that incredibly helpful. And so, we started cold plunging on November 23rd. Yeah, just about 2 months now. And it's been an amazing experience for me that has kind of, I've sort of developed the breathing and meditation skills in the cold plunge that I've actually been able to carry over into the rest of my day, which is incredible, which I think is the goal of meditation. If you're calm while you're meditating, that's amazing. But the true test is, can you continue to be calm when shit goes wrong in your life, when you, have some negative experience or something that you have to deal with in your day-to-day? Like, can you remain meditative and calm? Can you remember to take those deep breaths? So this all ties into ADHD in so many ways, because so much of my ADHD symptoms, like lack of focus and like, not being able to sit still and do one thing, were emotional regulation based. So when I learned how to breathe and how to be present and how to be still and better regulate my emotions, it has radically changed in a positive way my ability to tackle challenges in my day-to-day life.
Yes, everything is connected. So when you learn how to meditate in the cold water, you are carrying that out and you learn how to meditate in real life. And it's so easy to do it in the cold water because there's literally nothing else that you can do. other than focus on your breathing. Because if you don't focus on your breathing, you will not be able to stay in the water and you freak out and you get out. So in order to stay into the water, you have to calm down your breathing. You have to learn how to slow down your breath, and you have to learn how to be completely present. And I want to point out that I think the whole point of meditating is not to be calm, it's to be present. And I think there's like a tiny little difference there, because I feel like calm, people kind of might take that as like, oh, I need to be zen, I need to be quiet, just peaceful. Like, that's not always the case. You're gonna have emotions come up and you're gonna have feelings arise. And the practice is like, are you gonna react to that right away, or can you pause and actually consider what your next action is gonna be? That's presence and mindfulness. Like mindfully taking awareness of your next step. That's the important part. Instead of just like using your monkey brain and doing whatever comes naturally, like, can you just pause and consider if that next action that you're going to take is actually a useful one?
That's a really good distinction for sure. Because yeah, I think that I've had that perspective around meditation before as well, where I thought that I had to completely change my whole personality. Like, I thought I could no longer be excitable or passionate or all of these things, because I thought if I meditated regularly, like it would just zap all sense of my personality, and then I would just become like this Zen robot person. But there's nothing wrong with being calm and Zen, but I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to take presence into your life, into whatever you're doing. If you're excited about something creative that you're working on, be present in that creative pursuit and be excited about it. If I was doing something creative that I was excited about, sometimes there would be like chatter in my brain going, well, you could be working, you could be studying, you could be doing something else, but you're avoiding it, or you're lazy, or I would say these mean things about myself that I no longer say, or that I've worked on. But it's just about being present in the action that you're actually doing.
We've talked about a lot in this episode, and we would really love to hear feedback from you guys, and especially if you want us to elaborate on anything, because I don't think we went into anything into super like in depth, especially with the tools that we've used to help us with our ADHD. We would really love to hear from you guys.
Just anyone who is willing to be here for this journey with us, I'm so grateful for you, and I'm really excited to continue the conversation.
Yes, so grateful.
Talk soon. Leave us a rating on Spotify.
Bye.
Bye.